The galaxy had been at peace for decades, its vast expanse divided into safe sectors and quiet systems. The military had long since reduced its presence in the outer edges, where pirate groups once roamed. The warships that had once patrolled the endless stars now rested in silence at their home bases. No one expected anything to disrupt this uneasy calm. But that was before the event they would never forget. One cold, quiet morning, an anomaly appeared on the galactic radar. It was faint at first, just a small blip among the many. Officers working in the command center didn't think much of it, believing it to be an error, something insignificant. But the blip grew, slowly but steadily. And as it grew, so did the concern. It wasn't long before they realized this wasn't some glitch. The signal was real. A warship was moving through the void, heading toward the heart of the galaxy. The ship didn't belong to any known faction. It was unlike anything anyone had ever seen. The hull was sleek, smooth, almost alien in its design. It wasn't made of any metal they recognized, its surface glinting in a way that reflected light strangely, almost as if the ship was cloaked. Its shape wasn't quite like any warship the military had created. It was not the sharp-edged structure of a battleship, nor the bulky build of a cruiser. This one was different. The crew on the nearby observation station worked feverishly to get a better read. They were able to scan its outer structure, but as they tried to delve deeper, the ship's systems seemed to block their scans. It was as if the ship didn't want to be understood. The more they tried to learn, the more the ship kept its secrets hidden. How could this be possible? Lieutenant Commander Corbin whispered under his breath, watching the monitors flicker with confusion. There's no record of anything like this. The higher-ups in the command chain quickly took notice. What had once been a minor blip now required immediate attention. And so the orders were given to prepare the fleet. In mere hours, a fleet of destroyers and cruisers assembled at the outer rim to investigate the unknown ship that had appeared from nowhere. The fleet moved cautiously, aware of the strange energy signals emanating from the ship. It didn't move like a normal warship. There was no obvious propulsion, no visible exhaust from engines. It seemed to float, drifting silently through space, as though guided by some invisible force. The atmosphere aboard the command fleet grew tense. Even the seasoned fleet officers, who had spent years in space, could feel the weight of something truly strange hanging over them. The ship was still a few light years away, but they all knew this encounter could be far from ordinary. Then came the first shock. As the fleet closed in on the unknown warship, something unusual happened. A transmission, faint and garbled at first, came through. At first, the officers on the fleet's flagship couldn't make sense of it, but slowly the message became clearer, until there was no mistaking it. The voice was calm, but it carried an unmistakable command, like that of someone who had been in control for centuries. "You are trespassing," the voice said, though no one could pinpoint its source. "Leave now or face the consequences." The fleet commander, Admiral Zane, stood silent for a moment, unsure of how to respond. A direct threat from an unknown ship was unprecedented. They had no idea who or what was on board, or what kind of power this vessel might wield. However, there was no retreat. The mission was clear. They had to investigate. "Raise shields," Admiral Zane ordered, his voice steady despite the unease in his chest. "Prepare to fire at will if it proves hostile." The fleet moved into position, taking formation around the mysterious warship. The ship's calm, steady drift through space seemed to mock their aggressive posturing. It didn't change course, didn't respond. It just continued its slow, deliberate movement. Suddenly, without warning, the unknown ship flickered, almost like it was disappearing and reappearing in space. One moment it was there. The next, it was gone. The fleet's scanners went wild, trying to catch its new position, but it was no use. The ship had vanished. A heartbeat later, it reappeared just outside the formation, its presence so close that it was as if it had been there all along. "Impossible," shouted Lieutenant Commander Corbin. It's moving faster than our sensors can track. This shouldn't be possible. Shut down all non-essential systems, Admiral Zane ordered. His voice had gone cold, a sharp contrast to the heat building in the room. He knew they were in uncharted territory now. The unknown ship didn't stop there. It didn't even seem to care about the fleet around it. In a move that left everyone speechless, the mysterious warship released a single pulse of energy. It didn't come from any cannon. They couldn't see any weapons. But the pulse sent shockwaves through space, powerful enough to rattle their ships to the core. "Shields are holding, but just barely," reported the lead officer of the flagship. "We're barely holding together." Another pulse came, and then another. The fleet was in danger. Despite all their technology, all their years of training, they were helpless in the face of this ship's power. Then, as if deciding it had seen enough, the mysterious warship's energy pulses ceased. The ship hovered, watching the fleet with an eerie stillness, as if waiting for something. But the moment passed, and the fleet was left to lick its wounds. The fleet had learned only one thing for certain. This ship was not ordinary. It was not from any faction they recognized, and it was powerful beyond belief. Admiral Zane knew one thing for sure. He had no idea what they were up against, but the galaxy would never be the same again. The question now was, what did the ship want? And who, or what, was controlling it? The peaceful galaxy that had known nothing but peace for so long was about to be shattered by something far more dangerous than anyone had ever imagined. The real battle was only just beginning. The fleet had been shaken, but not defeated. As the unknown ship loomed silently in the distance, the crew aboard the flagship, Endurance, worked tirelessly to analyze every piece of data they had collected. The sudden appearance of the ship had thrown them into chaos, and the raw power they had witnessed left everyone questioning their assumptions about the galaxy's peace. Admiral Zane paced back and forth on the bridge, his mind racing. "Report," he demanded, his voice sharp. The tension in the room was palpable. The fleet's engineers and technicians were scrambling to interpret the mysterious readings from the ship, yet no one had an answer to the most important question. What was it? Lieutenant Commander Corbin, his face ashen from the sudden onslaught of data, stood in front of the analysis station. "Sir, the energy pulses. They're not like anything we've seen before. They're not from any weapon known to us. The readings suggest a power source that defies all logic." Corbin wasn't the only one with questions. The entire crew felt the unease. This wasn't just any ship. It was something far more complex, far more dangerous. The unknown warship had made it clear that it wasn't afraid of them. It had shown its strength, and in a mere instant had taken control of the battlefield without firing a single shot. "The ship, it's alive," muttered Chief Engineer Vance from the back of the room. He looked at the readouts in disbelief. "Sir, I think it might not be a ship at all. We're looking at something different. This vessel, if it even is a vessel, doesn't behave like anything we've encountered. It doesn't just move through space. It manipulates it. I think it's alive. It's sentient." The idea seemed almost absurd, but it was the only explanation that made any sense. Every sensor, every calculation, every bit of data seemed to indicate something that wasn't supposed to exist. A warship that could manipulate space itself. A machine, or perhaps something more, that could vanish and reappear at will. Admiral Zane rubbed his temples, fighting back the growing headache. If this ship is alive, if it has a mind of its own, then we're dealing with something we've never faced before. We need to approach this with caution. Prepare a second wave of ships. We'll need to know more before we can make any decisions. But even as the order was given, Zane couldn't shake the feeling that they were already too far into this situation to turn back. Something about the ship's appearance felt deliberate, as if it had been waiting for them, anticipating their arrival. The crew had been so focused on the possibility of a threat that they had ignored the most important question. Why? The mysterious warship didn't seem to have a clear mission. It didn't attack. It didn't demand anything, except silence. It watched, and it waited. There was an eerie calm in its every move. As the fleet prepared for the next phase of their investigation, Admiral Zane couldn't help but wonder if they had walked into a trap. Was this ship a warning, or was it simply biding its time? There were too many unknowns. And then, as the fleet continued its slow approach, something unexpected happened. A massive wave of energy radiated outward from the mysterious ship, knocking all the nearby fleet's vessels off course. The force was so great that even the Endurance shuddered under the pressure. The bridge was flooded with alarms as systems went haywire, and lights flickered. Corbin barely held onto his console as the ship rocked. It's like the ship is scanning us," he gasped. "We're being probed." Admiral Zane's eyes narrowed as he watched the readings. It was more than just a scan. It was as though the ship was assessing them, studying their strengths and weaknesses, much like a predator sizing up its prey. His mind raced, trying to formulate a plan, but he knew that time was running out. This ship wasn't just a myth. It was a force that had the power to reshape everything. "We need to respond," Zane said, his voice low but filled with resolve. "Prepare all weapons. We will not be caught off guard again." But even as he gave the order, deep down, he knew this wouldn't be a conventional fight. This wasn't a ship to be destroyed. It was something far more ancient, far more mysterious. And as they were about to discover, its true power was still hidden beneath layers of secrets. The fleet was now fully aware of one thing. The rules of war had just changed. And this time, they were the ones who would have to adapt. As the energy waves from the warship began to dissipate, the fleet took its position. The next move, however, would belong to the enemy, and all they could do now was wait. A waiting game that could very well decide the future of the galaxy itself. The question was, would the Endurance and its fleet survive long enough to figure out the ship's true purpose? Or would they become yet another myth, lost to history? The fleet had just begun to regroup after the devastating energy pulse, and the crew aboard Endurance was still reeling from the shock. Systems were slowly coming back online, but it was clear that their encounter with the mysterious warship had rattled even the most seasoned officers. Nothing they had seen or studied in their years of service had prepared them for this. Admiral Zane stood at the head of the bridge, staring out at the distant form of the unknown ship. It hovered there, motionless but unmistakably present. The silence was suffocating, and it only added to the tension that permeated the entire fleet. Every officer, every crew member, could feel it deep in their bones, the sense that something monumental was about to unfold. "We can't just sit here and wait for it to make the next move," Zane muttered to himself, tapping a finger against the edge of his console. "It already knows our weaknesses. We need a plan." Lieutenant Commander Corbin stood by, still recovering from the earlier shockwave. His eyes were bloodshot, and his voice trembled as he spoke. "Admiral, this ship, it's not just a weapon. It's more than that. The energy readings, it's like it's alive. I don't know how, but the data doesn't lie. It senses us." Zane's gaze sharpened. "Senses us? Are you telling me this thing can think?" Corbin hesitated, but nodded slowly. "I think it knows what we're capable of, what we're planning. And it's playing a game with us. We've never seen anything like this before, sir. The technology is unfathomable." The words hit Zane harder than expected. The crew had faced countless threats in their years of service, but none like this. This wasn't a ship that simply followed the rules of war. It didn't think like a machine. It thought like something far beyond anything they could comprehend. As they spoke, the ship, no, the being, hovered ominously. It was as if it was waiting for them to make the first move, daring them to strike. The crew of the Endurance watched helplessly, unable to do anything but observe. Zane's mind raced with possibilities. Was it waiting to strike back? Was it an enemy? Or something even more dangerous, a force of nature? A flash of bright blue light suddenly pulsed from the mysterious ship, sending another wave of energy outward. This time, The pulse was much more contained, but still powerful enough to send shockwaves through the Endurance and the nearby vessels. The fleet's ships groaned under the pressure as their hulls buckled slightly, but they held firm. "Report," Zane barked. "Sir, the energy pulse. It's interacting with our systems," shouted the communications officer. "It's as though it's scanning us, testing us again." "We're not just dealing with a ship," Corbin said, more to himself than anyone else. "We're facing something far more advanced. Whatever it is, it doesn't play by our rules. It understands us, and it knows exactly what it wants." The weight of the realization hit everyone hard. They weren't fighting just any enemy. They were dealing with something that didn't need to destroy them through brute force. It didn't need to wage war in the traditional sense. It had a different kind of power, one they couldn't measure or predict. Zane looked out over the vast expanse of space once more. He had faced enemies before, but this was beyond anything he had ever imagined. He couldn't fathom the true nature of the warship or its capabilities. All he knew was that this was no ordinary conflict. The stakes had just become far higher than anyone had anticipated. But even as he contemplated the situation, his instincts kicked in. He was a soldier, and soldiers didn't back down. There was always a way to fight back, no matter the odds. They just had to find it. "Prepare all units. We're going to find out what this ship wants," Zane ordered, his voice steady despite the rising anxiety in his chest. "We're not letting it dictate the battle. Get me a direct line to all fleet commanders." He paused as the communications officer worked quickly to make the connection. The crew watched him, waiting for the next move. Zane's mind was already calculating strategies, but he couldn't shake the feeling that whatever came next would change everything. For the first time, he felt the weight of his decision. If this was a trap, if the ship was leading them into a disaster, then they had little chance of surviving. But he couldn't hesitate. Not now. If there was even a chance that this ship was the key to the future of the galaxy, or the key to its destruction, he had to take it. The tension on the bridge grew as the fleet's ships aligned themselves for what was to come. Zane looked to Corbin, who had returned to his console, tapping frantically as more data poured in. His face was a mix of disbelief and dread. They were about to find out if they could stop what had already started. And deep down, Zane knew that no matter how it ended, they would never be the same. "Let's move out," Zane commanded, his voice filled with purpose. "Prepare to engage, but keep your distance. We're going to see if we can force this thing to reveal its true nature." And so, the Endurance and its fleet moved forward. The silence was deafening, but Zane knew that the storm was only just beginning. The fate of the galaxy could very well depend on the choices they made in the coming moments. Would they live to uncover the truth about the ship? Or would they fall, just like the many ships before them, to the warship that shouldn't exist but somehow did? The answers were out there, waiting for them to find them. And Zane was determined to make sure they were the ones who wrote the next chapter. The Endurance and its fleet surged ahead, their engines glowing brightly against the backdrop of the void. Yet despite their strength, the eerie silence that surrounded them weighed heavily on everyone aboard. It felt as if the galaxy itself had stopped breathing, watching in anticipation of the confrontation that was about to unfold. The unknown ship, still looming in the distance, had not moved since the initial energy pulse. It remained as still and imposing as a celestial monument, its massive form now casting a shadow that reached out across the stars. Admiral Zane's grip tightened around the armrest of his command chair, his mind racing with calculations and scenarios. Every part of him screamed to press the attack, to engage and destroy this ship that shouldn't exist. But another part, a quieter part, told him to wait. This ship was different. This wasn't like any warship he had encountered in his years of service. It was beyond anything he could imagine, and every instinct told him not to underestimate it. "We should take a more cautious approach," Admiral, Commander Tessa Liang said, breaking the silence. She stood beside him, her expression as tense as his. We don't know what this ship is capable of. We may be walking into a trap." Zane nodded slowly, but his resolve remained firm. If it was a trap, it would have attacked us already. It wants something. We need to find out what. Meanwhile, across the fleet, the other commanders were already preparing their ships. They were close now, too close to turn back. They had to know if the mysterious warship was a threat, and if so, how to deal with it. But no one was comfortable. No one was ready. "Admiral, the unknown ship has activated its weapons systems," reported Lieutenant Corbin from his station. Zane's heart skipped a beat. This was it. This was the moment they had all been waiting for. They had crossed the threshold, and now the unknown ship was revealing its hand. But what did it mean? Would it open fire on them? Or was this another warning, another test of their resolve? "All units, braced for impact," Zane commanded, his voice steady despite the chaos in his mind. "Prepare to engage with defensive countermeasures, but hold your fire. Let's see what it does." Just as the order was given, the mysterious ship released a pulse of energy that rippled through the void. It was unlike anything the fleet had encountered before, a wave of energy that seemed to distort the very fabric of space itself. It wasn't an attack, it was an observation. The pulse washed over the fleet, striking every ship like a brushstroke across a canvas. Yet, the ships held their course. For a brief moment, everything seemed to freeze. The pulse passed, but the feeling of unease lingered. The ships had survived the pulse, but now they were left with more questions than answers. "Report," Zane snapped. It's scanning us," Lieutenant Corbin said, his voice filled with disbelief. "The pulse wasn't an attack. It's trying to understand us. It's gathering information. The data is overwhelming, but it's unlike anything we've seen. It's almost like it's reading us." "Reading us?" Zane repeated, a frown crossing his face. "What the hell does that mean?" "It means," Corbin said slowly, "that this ship is far beyond anything we've ever encountered. It's not just a weapon. It's intelligent." The weight of the statement hung in the air. Zane felt his stomach churn as the implications of Corbin's words began to settle in. An intelligent ship, a ship that could think. It wasn't simply alive. It was a force with purpose and intent, and that made it far more dangerous than anything they had faced before. For a long moment, Zane did not speak. He was caught in a whirlwind of thoughts, trying to process everything. He had no idea what kind of game this ship was playing. But one thing was certain. They couldn't afford to lose focus now. "All ships, move into defensive formation," Zane ordered, his voice unwavering. "We'll take no chances. Let's see what this thing does next." He turned to Corbin. "Can you make sense of the readings? Can we anticipate its next move?" I'm trying, sir," Corbin replied, his fingers flying over his console. "The data is coming in too fast. It's as if the ship is trying to communicate, but we can't decipher it yet." Zane's frustration grew. Time was not on their side, and every second they wasted could be their last. But they had no choice but to proceed cautiously. They had to learn more about this ship and what it wanted before they could decide how to respond. "I want a direct line to the other fleet commanders," Zane ordered. "We need to stay unified on this. If it decides to attack, we need to be ready to act as one." The communications officer nodded and initiated the connection, but the minutes felt like hours. As the silence continued, the crew of the Endurance remained tense, each person watching and waiting, anticipating the next move. Then suddenly, the ship's energy fluctuated, and a massive force began to build up. The weapons systems were powering up. Zane felt a chill run down his spine. "What the hell is it doing now?" he muttered. The unknown ship was preparing to strike, and they were about to find out just how much destruction one ship could bring. The fleet braced, knowing they would soon find out if they could survive the attack, or if they would be wiped from existence by a warship that shouldn't even exist. The fate of the galaxy now rested on the choices they made in the coming moments. But Zane was resolute. There was no turning back. The tension in the air was palpable, thick with the sense of impending doom. Every crew member aboard the Endurance could feel it. The weight of the moment, the uncertainty of what was about to happen. The unknown ship had not fired yet, but its weapons were charging, building a force that crackled with destructive potential. Zane's mind raced as he thought about his next move. Every instinct screamed at him to make a decision, but there were no clear answers. He could not afford to make a mistake. "Commander Liang." He called out to his trusted second-in-command, his voice steady, though his heart pounded in his chest. "Have you found any more information on that ship? Anything that might tell us what it wants?" Commander Liang, who had been silent up until that point, turned to him. Her face was etched with worry. "The data we've gathered is incomplete," she admitted. "It's almost as if it's blocking us from understanding its true nature. But whatever it is, it's not just a warship. It's alive in ways we don't fully comprehend." Zane nodded grimly. "Alive? You mean it's not just a machine, but something more? More than anything we've encountered?" "Yes," she replied, her voice low. "This ship is a sentient being, and its purpose is still a mystery." Zane's hands tightened into fists as the weight of Liang's words sunk in. A sentient ship. It was an impossible concept. A ship built not just to destroy, but to think, feel, and act with purpose. The very idea of it made his head spin. How could something like that exist? "Can we communicate with it?" Zane asked, though he already knew the answer. The ship had shown no signs of wanting to engage in any kind of peaceful dialogue. Its energy pulses had been nothing short of menacing. "I've tried," Liang responded, "but it's not responding to our hails. It's almost like we're not even being heard." Zane stared at the massive ship on the view screen, its ominous shape looming in the distance, silent but deadly. It wasn't just a weapon of mass destruction. It was something far more dangerous. This wasn't a mindless force, an enemy to be defeated with sheer might. This was something that could think, adapt, and learn. A new kind of adversary, one that didn't follow the rules of war. "We need to figure out its weakness," Zane said, his voice filled with determination. "If we don't, we're all dead." At that moment, the ship's energy pulse reached its peak. It was a blinding burst of power that surged through the void, crackling with destructive intent. Zane's eyes widened as he realized that this was it. The ship was about to strike. But just as the pulse began to form, it stopped. Their ship, had not fired. Instead, it released a low hum, like a growl from deep within its metallic hull. The energy levels fluctuated erratically, as if the ship itself was struggling, confused by the strange situation. Zane's heart skipped a beat. The ship was hesitant. It was as if it was unsure about what to do next, caught between two conflicting forces, its natural instinct to destroy and something else. Something more. "Is it trying to understand us?" Liang asked, her voice filled with disbelief. She turned to Zane, searching for answers. Zane leaned forward in his chair, his mind working overtime to process what was happening. Could it be? Could this ship, this mind, be seeking more than just an immediate battle? Perhaps there was more to this encounter than just survival. Maybe it wanted something. Maybe it was searching for something, an answer, a resolution. "Send another hail," Zane commanded urgently. "Maybe this time, we'll get through." The comms officer nodded and activated the transmission once more, broadcasting their message into the abyss of space. This time, however, they weren't sending a threat or a challenge. They were sending something different, an invitation. An invitation for peace, or at the very least, a chance to communicate. "Unknown ship," Zane's voice echoed throughout the bridge as the message went out. "We are not your enemies. We seek to understand why you have come. Please respond. We do not wish to fight unless we must." There was a long, tense pause. Zane held his breath, watching the ship on the view screen. Had they made the right decision? Would the ship retaliate or listen to their plea? Then, something incredible happened. A series of pulses shot out from the ship's core, but this time, they weren't destructive. They were soft, almost gentle in their approach. The waves of energy moved in rhythmic patterns, as if they were speaking to them in a language they didn't understand. The ship was responding. No, communicating. For the first time, Zane felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this ship wasn't just a force of destruction. Maybe it was something else entirely. Something they could learn from. "We have to figure out what it's trying to say," Zane said, his voice filled with urgency. But before they could make any further move, the ship's energy pulse began to change again. The hum became louder, the frequency of the pulse increasing. The ship had made its decision. It was preparing to act, but the question remained, what would it do next? Zane held his breath as the next chapter of this extraordinary encounter was about to unfold. The bridge of the Endurance was silent, the crew frozen in anticipation as the unknown ship's energy pulse intensified. Each member of the crew knew that the next few moments could determine the outcome of their lives. Zane's eyes were fixed on the view screen, which showed the massive, shadowy silhouette of the ship, its hull shimmering with power. The air was thick with tension, and it felt as though the entire universe was holding its breath. Commander Liang stood beside Zane, her face unreadable, but her eyes revealed a depth of concern. "It's like it's charging up for something big," she said quietly, her voice barely a whisper against the hum of the ship. "We've never seen anything like this before." Zane nodded, his fingers gripping the armrests of his command chair tightly. He had faced countless battles, but this was different. The ship they were up against wasn't just an enemy vessel. It was something alive, something intelligent, something capable of thinking, adapting, and responding. It wasn't just a machine. It was a living, breathing force of nature, and they had no idea what it wanted. The crew on the bridge was on edge. They had prepared for combat, but they had never anticipated a foe like this. The ship's energy pulses were unpredictable, erratic, and far more powerful than anything they had encountered. It was as if the ship was testing them, trying to gauge their strength, waiting to see how they would respond. Zane's mind raced as he considered their options. They could try to fight, but the Endurance wasn't equipped for a full-scale battle against something of this magnitude. If the ship fired, there was no guarantee they would survive. But if they backed down, if they retreated, they might never be able to stop it from coming back. The unknown ship was a force to be reckoned with, and it was unlike anything they had ever faced before. "What if it's trying to tell us something?" Zane murmured, almost to himself. His thoughts raced as he tried to make sense of the strange, rhythmic pulses emanating from the ship. What if this ship isn't just here to destroy us? What if it's trying to communicate? Liang raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. "Communicate? With us? How do you propose we do that?" Zane's gaze shifted back to the view screen. The energy pulse continued to grow, and the ship's form seemed to shimmer, its presence more imposing with each passing second. He could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. The Endurance was surrounded, outmatched by an enemy that wasn't just trying to destroy them, but was waiting for them to make the first move. "We don't have much time," Zane said firmly. "We have to try something different. If we're going to survive this, we need to understand what that ship wants." He turned to the comms officer, who had been monitoring the situation intently. "Send another message," Zane ordered. "But this time, don't ask for a surrender or a ceasefire. Ask it what it wants. Tell it we're not its enemy, but we need to know if there's a way to end this peacefully." The comms officer nodded and quickly began typing up the transmission. Zane could feel the weight of every word being typed. They were walking on a razor's edge, hoping that the ship would respond to their plea. This wasn't just about surviving. It was about trying to understand something beyond their comprehension. The message went out, and once again, the silence on the bridge was deafening. The energy pulse from the ship grew stronger, the vibrations traveling through the Endurance, rattling the hull. Zane felt his pulse quicken as he waited for a response. Would this ship answer? Would it recognize their attempt to communicate? Or would it see them as nothing more than another obstacle to eliminate? The ship on the view screen suddenly stopped pulsing. For a moment, everything was still. It was as if time itself had paused, holding its breath. The crew waited, collectively tense, unsure if they were on the brink of a breakthrough or the edge of annihilation. Then, without warning, the ship began to pulse again. But this time, the energy waves were different. They were slower, more deliberate, as if responding to the Endurance's plea. The vibrations felt almost like a heartbeat, steady and rhythmic. Did it respond? Liang asked, her voice low with disbelief. Zane leaned forward, his eyes fixed on the view screen, trying to decipher the meaning behind the pulses. He felt a strange sense of hope stir within him. It wasn't much, but the change in the ship's energy pattern felt like progress. Maybe, just maybe, they were starting to understand each other. Before Zane could say anything, the comms officer spoke up. We're getting a response, sir. It's coming through now. Zane's heart raced as the screen flickered to life, showing a new message. It wasn't in any language they understood, but the pulse-like rhythm seemed to carry a meaning, a pattern, a message. Zane's mind worked quickly. This was no ordinary communication. This was a form of language they had never encountered before, a way of speaking that transcended words. It was energy, raw and untamed. Get it translated, Zane ordered. We need to know what it's saying. This could be the key to stopping it. The tension on the bridge reached a breaking point. The crew held their collective breath as they waited for the translation. Would it be a threat? A command? Or was this the beginning of something entirely different? In that moment, Zane realized that they were on the edge of a new frontier. The ship, this mysterious, seemingly invincible force, wasn't just an enemy. It was a challenge, a riddle wrapped in mystery. And for the first time, Zane felt like they might just have the chance to unravel it. The response was coming, and it was going to change everything. The tension in the air was palpable as the crew of the Endurance watched the view screen, waiting for the translated message to appear. Zane's mind raced with possibilities. What if the message was a warning? What if the ship was simply testing them, trying to find out what they would do under pressure? The idea of communication, the very concept of understanding this mysterious enemy, was both exhilarating and terrifying. They were venturing into the unknown, and every step could lead them into even more danger. The seconds felt like hours. Zane could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him as he tried to anticipate what would come next. They had never dealt with anything like this before. The mysterious ship was like nothing they had ever encountered, and they were at the mercy of its will. Then, just as the suspense seemed unbearable, the translation flashed up on the screen. It was simple, almost too simple. The message was a series of rhythmic pulses, a pattern of energy signals that translated into just one sentence. We are not enemies. We seek only what was taken. Zane's heart skipped a beat. He wasn't sure whether to feel relief or dread. The ship wasn't attacking. It wasn't threatening them. But the words, while peaceful, were cryptic. What did the ship mean by what was taken? Who had taken something from it? And more importantly, what did the ship want in return? Analyze the message, Zane ordered. We need to know if there's more to it. Break it down. Every single pulse, every single vibration. The crew worked feverishly, their fingers flying over consoles as they tried to decipher the deeper meaning behind the message. The energy patterns were complex, and each translation revealed new layers, but there was still so much they didn't understand. Liang stood next to Zane, her face a mask of determination. We need to be careful, Captain, she said quietly. What if we're walking into a trap? What if this is all part of some elaborate ruse? Zane met her gaze. He understood her concern, but there was something about this ship, something about the way it communicated, that felt different from the usual hostile encounters they had faced. It wasn't acting like a typical enemy. It was acting like a being with a purpose, with a plan. And that gave Zane hope that they might find a way to avoid further conflict. "We can't afford to make assumptions," Zane replied. "We need to know everything about this ship. If it's here for peace, we'll find a way to make that happen. But if it's here for war, we'll be ready." As the crew continued to analyze the message, the ship's energy pulses became more pronounced, almost as though it was waiting for them to respond. It was patient, almost expectant. The Endurance was caught in a delicate balance. Too much hesitation, and they might appear weak; too much aggression, and they might provoke an all-out war. Then, just as Zane thought the analysis would take forever, the lead scientist, Dr. Alaris, approached him with a surprising revelation. "Captain, we've made a breakthrough. The energy pulses weren't just a message. They're a map that leads directly to the source of the ship's power." Zane raised an eyebrow. "A map? What does it lead to?" Dr. Alaris hesitated for a moment before continuing. "It leads to something hidden deep within the ship, something we believe is the key to understanding its purpose. The energy patterns are pointing to an area on the ship that is almost completely sealed off, an area we've never been able to access. But now it seems to be calling us." Zane's mind raced. If this ship was truly seeking something that had been taken from it, then this hidden area might hold the answer. They were on the brink of discovering something monumental, but they would have to move quickly before the situation escalated beyond their control. "Prepare a team," Zane said, his voice steady despite the whirlwind of thoughts in his mind. "We're going aboard the ship. We're going to find out what this message really means, and what it's after." The crew worked in a flurry of activity, organizing an away team and making preparations for the risky mission ahead. Zane's mind was focused, knowing that this could either lead to their salvation or their destruction. The fate of the Endurance rested on their ability to understand the enemy's true intentions. As the away team prepared to depart, Zane couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to uncover something far bigger than just a warship. The mystery surrounding this ship, its message, and the secret it was hiding had the potential to change everything. But for now, all they could do was move forward, step into the unknown, and hope that the answers they sought would be enough to secure their future. The crew of the Endurance was about to embark on a journey that could either solve the riddle of the mysterious ship or condemn them all. Time was running out, and the choices they made in the coming moments would determine the outcome of the war, their survival, and the fate of the galaxy itself.